Hey, welcome back, guys. So my name's Anthony. I am a real estate agent here in California. And on this channel, I talk about most things that have to do with real estate, more specifically, usually real estate in California. And what we're going to talk about today is, do you need to pay closing costs for the buyer that's offering on your home? So let's go ahead and get this started. So do you need to pay closing costs for the buyer when you are selling your home? This isn't really an easy question to answer. And actually the answer is going to change depending on the market, the time of the market, where your house is located, a lot of different things. But one thing you want to consider is that most fees are negotiable. So nothing's actually set in stone. However, there are customary practices depending on which market you live in. So you want to be sure to talk to your real estate agent about that. And then they will be able to guide you on what fees are typical and what fees are not typical for a seller to pay. So let's go over a couple of things you want to consider if you are thinking about paying some of the closing costs for a buyer. So the first thing you want to consider is, who is your real estate agent? I've been in a couple of situations where as an experienced agent, was in a transaction with an inexperienced agent. And what had happened is that inexperienced agent had submitted an offer offering to pay the customary closing costs that the seller would typically pay. I'm there to represent my client, the seller, and if the buyer is willing to pay those fees for them, then so be it. I'm not going to alert them and let them know that those fees are not customary for the buyer to pay. So what had happened? My client ended up saving more money off of the closing. There were less fees for them to pay. So it worked out well for my client. However, the inexperienced agent who was representing the buyer, they ended up paying more than they actually needed to because they covered those fees. It was actually a title fee. So that's one thing you want to consider, is the agent that you are hiring, are they experienced, and do they know which items are customary for them to pay? The second thing is, sometimes buyers just don't have enough money for the down payment and the closing costs. And most sellers aren't going to want to cover the closing costs for the buyer because they're looking at their bottom line. They're looking to make as much money as possible. So it's less likely. But buyers know this. So sometimes what can happen is the buyer will offer more than what the seller is asking for if they will cover the closing costs. And sometimes it's just enough to pad the sales price for the closing costs. Sometimes they're willing to go above that because they know that the seller is accommodating them and they know that other sellers aren't going to cover those closing costs even if they inflate the price. So that could actually work for your favor as a seller if you end up getting a higher price. Because at the end of the day, if you're covering the closing costs and they're going to pay you more, then it might work out in your favor. The one caveat to that is, will it appraise for whatever the buyer is going to be offering, that inflated price? So be sure to talk to your real estate agent about that. They'll be able to guide you on that and let you know what those potential scenarios can be. Another thing you want to consider if you're going to be paying the closing costs for the buyer is the repair negotiations. A lot of lenders will put a cap on how much the seller can contribute to the buyer. So if you've already contributed 3% to closing costs and then you get into another negotiation for the repairs, then the lender may say, hey, no, you can't actually contribute anymore. You would have to craft it a different way. Sometimes you're going to have to pay the contractor directly. Sometimes you're going to have to lower the price. So just kind of keep that in mind if you already offered paying the closing costs right from the beginning of the transaction. So again, to kind of recap on that, does the seller typically pay for the buyer's closing costs? I would say in the market that I work in, not really. It's not very common, especially right now. We are in a seller's market, so sellers are more and more picky on the price and they just want a clean, easy transaction. But that could change at any time. If we switch back into a full-on buyer's market, then that starts to become more commonplace. But again, talk to your real estate agent and they're going to be able to guide you on what might be typical in your area. If you want more information, I'm going to leave some information more in the description below, so be sure to click on that. And if you have experience in your market as far as closing costs for buyers and sellers, leave me a comment. I'm always kind of curious to see how it works in other markets. And I hope that you found this video useful. If so, click thumbs up and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.